So my name is Lindsey Cole. I've mermaided the Thames, I've walked the rabbit-proof fence of Australia, and I've circumnavigated Australia with truck drivers and cycled the length of Africa. I love adventure. I never feel more alive than when I'm out on the open road or in a desert or in a wild bush trying to navigate myself from A to B, and I'm not necessarily the best planner, but that's all part of the adventure, trying to see how it all naturally unfolds. So I learnt to free dive in Indonesia, and when I was ascending after one of the dives, I got to the surface and felt a sting to my hand. Thought it was a jellyfish bobbing away, but it was actually a piece of plastic. And then I realised I was surrounded by plastic. So I wanted to do something about it, and Britain isn't much better with their plastic consumption either. So I was looking for my next adventure to do, and many free divers I saw wore mermaid tails, so I thought, oh, I'll mermaid the Thames and highlight how we're choking our mermaids with plastic. So I swam 120 miles from the source to Teddington Lock and the non-tidal Thames I could only last 45 minutes at a time in the first few days because it was 7 degrees. It was November. I got too excited, I just wanted to do it. And by the end, I was in the water for 4 hours, 5 hours at a time. So yeah, it was pretty grueling, but really fun. And I really missed it afterwards because it took 22 days straight, and the Thames sort of became my home. We had a mermaid sculpture. My friend Barbara, who canoed beside me, made a sculpture out of 600 bottles of plastic recycled, and we filled her up with everything that we found to highlight how we're choking our mermaids. And we could have easily filled her up 4, 5, 6 times. She was 6 foot high. But actually we were pleasantly surprised in some places because the river was much cleaner, because there's lots of people who love the river in those areas and really look after it. I call them the Thames Angels. My best adventure, without a doubt, was walking the rabbit-proof fence. In 1931, 3 little Aboriginal girls were forcibly removed from their home and taken to a settlement 1,000 miles away to be assimilated into white society. They weren't allowed to speak their language, they had to speak English, and they lived in squalor. And they didn't like it, obviously, and they wanted to be at home with their families like any 8 to 12-year-olds would. So they escaped, and they found their way home by walking the rabbit-proof fence, which was erected at a similar time in the early 1900s to keep the ever-exploding population of rabbits out of pastoral Australia. So it actually ran through their town of Jigalong. So the eldest, Molly, knew that if she found it, she could find their way home. I read the book about 10 years ago when I was backpacking in Australia, and I had a broken leg, so I was feeling a bit sorry for myself, and it's really an inspiring story. But then my dad passed away suddenly a few months later, and I was on the first plane home. I was pretty, obviously, sad and depressed. And then I thought about the girls and what they'd been through, and they kind of helped me through my own low point. So I always wanted to return to Australia to retrace their journey. And I did, and I never knew if I was capable or if the fence was even there. And I didn't know if I could get to the start line. So I did everything step by step. I've never been so more prepared in my life. And I was taken in by their family at the end, and but 2 of the girls had passed away from the story. They did it in 1931, but one of them was still alive, and I got to meet her. So it was just a pretty incredible journey from start to finish. I was prepared to give up whilst walking the rabbit-proof fence because I thought it'd be so difficult, and it was in the outback and it was so remote, and water was pretty precious and not always available. And one time I did get severely lost in the bush, and I kept trying to, the fence had disappeared. It was hidden within the bush and it had been pulled down, and the bush was so thick that I just couldn't get through it, and I needed to go north-northeast, and it kept spitting me out and pushing me north-northwest. So I think I tripped. I was pushing a trolley which weighed 40 kilos, and at one point I pulled it and it got caught on a branch, and I catapulted forwards and I fell in a bush of brambles and thorns, and I just thought, wow, this is it, this is the end. And I'd also crossed my own track, so and I just trying for 2 hours. But I lay there and I thought about it, and I sort of let myself cry and unwound myself, and then I was all right. I just walked around that section of the bush and got on my way the next day. I don't know, I really took to swimming the Thames, so I'm thinking about a bigger swim maybe. There's nothing quite like wild swimming, even in the cold water, and I was quite amazed at how my body acclimatized from, because I was living in Spain before, so I was used to 17-degree water. The Thames was 7 degrees, so I went from doing 45-minute stints at a time to 4 hours. So I'd quite like to see how far or how long or how cold I could go for another swim. I am in contact with another mermaid, so she's suggesting a mermaid swim somewhere. Well, Molly from the Rabbit-Proof Fence, really, because I've done Ironman triathlon before, where you swim, I can't remember, 4 kilometers, cycle 120 miles and run a marathon, and you have all this nutrition, all this gear, all this technology to time yourselves, to push yourself through pain. And those little girls had nothing, just the courage, resilience and determination to get home. No shoes or provisions or anything. So I think that's one of the most incredible feats I've heard about, really. So I'd cycled the length of Britain, and I was at uni at the time and wanting to do journalism, so I went to Rwanda to make a documentary about the cycling team, and I fell in love with Africa. So when I knew the World Cup was going to be in South Africa, I decided I was going to go. My friends and family didn't want me to go alone, so I asked the Metro newspaper to help me find a team, and they did. And so we left at the end of January, and we got to South Africa, Rustenburg, for England's first game in June. So we passed through, I can't remember how many countries, Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, Botswana, Zambia, Zimbabwe and South Africa. Yeah, I think whatever idea you have, it's always doable. It's just you don't want to be too sensible, but you need to prepare. And if you're over prepared, then you'll be fine. And what tends to happen is you do over prepare, and like I did an itinerary for when I cycled through Africa, and we didn't stick to it at all. But take it step by step, and yeah, give it a go. But always go in with maybe if you get stuck or have a problem, there's no problem in pulling out, but if you give it a go, then you'll never know. I don't think it matters what you do. I don't think people need to be scared of the ideas that they want to do. Like, I roller skated to Bude in a nude suit because it rhymed, And to me, I thought that was a great idea, but to other people, they didn't understand it. Or I circumnavigated Australia with truck drivers purely because I had a lift with a couple of truck drivers before, and I was they totally dispelled my misconception of them. I thought they were potty-mouthed, chauvinistic, racist characters, and they were really quite kind and generous. So I wanted to see if I can get all the way around Australia collecting their stories, and I did. And again, people were unsure of me doing it, but if you're kind of prepared, and I backed myself up by getting them to speak on camera or taking photos of them and their truck and getting them to put it on their social media. So everyone knew where I was and when. So if you're safe and savvy, then I think give anything a go.